Some moments of our history are frozen in time. Whether it's George Washington crossing the Delaware or Neil Armstrong landing on the moon, important moments like these belong to all of us, a shared heritage. And few images stand out like that of Martin Luther King Jr. looking out over the vast crowd who marched on Washington in late August of 1963. That moment, along with Dr. King's iconic "I Have a Dream" speech, are well known by almost everyone. But the true power of that moment is even greater when one understands the context that led up to that day, that hour, that moment of time. Today, I'd like to discuss why the March on Washington was so important. Now, Dr. King's rise to prominence is already very well known. He was instrumental in organizing the Montgomery bus boycott of 1955, which had been sparked by Rosa Parks' refusal to give up her seat on a city bus. From there, King continued fighting for civil rights, often becoming the target of racist attacks and heavy-handed abuse. When he was arrested in Birmingham, Alabama in 1963, King wrote his famous Letter from a Birmingham Jail, in which he was openly critical of the so-called moderate white preachers who failed to stand up for the rights of the disenfranchised. King's letter addressed a difficult truth. While his movement had attracted lots of attention, racial and economic inequality were still pervasive across the country. Even allies like President Kennedy had not been as forceful in fighting for civil rights as was required. King understood that people needed to be inspired to act. Now, 1963 was seen as an important year. It was the 100-year anniversary of the Emancipation Proclamation, the order President Lincoln had issued to free Southern slaves. In May of '63, the influential activist A. Philip Randolph announced plans to march on Washington later that year, and by June, the leaders of several other civil rights groups were working together to pool their resources. Together, they'd have a much more powerful voice than they would separately. The group recruited other participants as well, including the white president of the United Auto Workers, one of the most powerful labor unions in the country. And there were disagreements over what the main focus of the march should be, but they were able to work together to assemble a list of goals, one which included higher minimum wage, federal laws banning job discrimination, and increased programs to help the unemployed. These were practical goals, targeted at the real ways in which discrimination affected people's lives. Finally, on August 28th, the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom began. More than 200,000 people participated, advocating for civil rights and an end to economic inequality. King's historic speech perfectly captured the spirit of the moment, inspiring millions of Americans to share in his dream. After the march, King and other organizers met with Kennedy. He'd just submitted his civil rights bill to Congress, and Kennedy believed that the power of the march would help his bill pass, securing many of the goals that the marchers had been fighting for. However, Kennedy would never live to see it. Just a few months later, he was gunned down while on a trip to Dallas, Texas. Lyndon Johnson became the next president, and he used Kennedy's murder as a rallying cry to pass the Civil Rights Bill. Change was coming to America. In the years since, our country has made unambiguous progress on civil rights, spurred in no small part by the March on Washington. However, despite the gains that we've made, King's dream has yet to be fully realized, and the economic inequalities that the marchers were protesting still exist. So I urge you not to look at this as just a moment in history, but also as a call to action, to continue the work that was brilliantly captured on that day, and to make America's tomorrow better than it is today.